What we're going to do, we're going to look back at some of these presentations points and actually discuss. I'm sure you have some questions and answers, but there's two ways you will be questions. Maybe you have some answers as well, but I'm particularly looking at your questions now. Two ways to address them. One is picture these participants and find them across during the conference. There's another 2 days going on. The other point, which is going to happen as soon as we start a group work, is they're going to join us in some of the groups. So you can actually ask some questions also and elucidate any problems you have. But yes, time now to actually engage and get your perspectives. So we have 3 questions that we think relate to these presentations in a comprehensive way. Of course, I'm sure you will bring some other interesting ideas to the mix, and that's the whole point of doing some group work. So if Eike can hold this. Yeah. We'd like you for about 20 minutes to pick one of these questions and discuss it in a group. First one is about developing indicators. How can we get around the lack of perfect baseline data? So practically, we're not here thinking about the ideal picture of measuring resilience, but what can we practically do to help countries we work in, get around this lack of perfect baseline data? Yeah? Second question that you can pick, how to help these countries link the ecological indicators with human outcomes, which I think relates particularly to actually the last 2 presentations. And the third question is development versus system resilience. Picking up on the presentation from Dr. Lance Robinson, how can we make sure that we build upon the ecological resilience work that's been done to address good development resilience work? Okay? And again, they are here to elucidate any questions around this. So we're going to have to split ourselves in 3 types of groups. Let's say this part of the first half of this row could focus on developing indicators. So if you want to discuss question 1, organize a group of 8-10 people around this area. Okay? If you're interested in linking to helping countries link ecological indicators with human outcomes, you come to this area of the room. And if you're interested in the third one, development versus system resilience with Dr. Robinson, at the back, we can organize also some groups of 8 to 10. What I would like you to do in those groups is to discuss, of course, to maybe take some notes. We would welcome any soft copy notes that you have. And at the end of the group work, we'll just take one key point, one killer soundbite. I almost feel like saying one tweet, but that's not enough, about the discussion that you've had in your group. We can't do more than that, because then I'd like to hand over back to Polly just to give us a couple of comments at the end. Is this clear? So, question 1, if you're interested, you come form a group over here. Question 2, you come form a group over here. And question 3, somewhere at the back. There probably will be more than one group for each of these questions, and so our participants will probably also have to split themselves. 20 minutes to do that, so we come back as one group around the hour, 4 o'clock. Okay? We wanted you to be engaged, to gather your energy, and before we start into the official program after this. Could we start actually with this group 1? Yeah, let's be boring and start with number 1.
So, yeah, I was with the group that had the focus question of how do we get around the problem of having perfect baseline data. And we had a really dynamic group with, I think, clearly some of the brightest minds in the room. And so there were kind of 3 or 4 takeaways from our group. Okay, very briefly. We thought that a big part of the solution to the problem was coming to some type of a consensus on what is good enough in terms of the data that's needed for baselines. So that just means a different modus operandi, not being perfectionists and coming to terms with what is good enough. That was one. The other big kind of takeaway was to incentivize the sharing of data and information. So I know that the topic of open data is getting a lot more discussion And we said, if we could just become better sharers of our data and information, this would make a significant dent in the problem of having access to perfect baseline data. And then we came into a discussion of, well, what prevents us from sharing, and how can we create incentives? It must be that many of us don't have the incentives to share. So we need systems that somehow create incentives to share. That was the second one. A third one was more from the perspective of, I think, analysis and modeling. And since we're dealing with something incredibly complex, which is resilience, and if we agree that once you have human beings and biophysical systems and socioeconomic systems and all that, it is incredibly complex, and we have to be more comfortable with the uncertainty that this learning as we go type approach. That was, I think, the third one. And then the fourth one was just very, very practical, and it was about having the resources to kind of create the data and information systems that are necessary, and that requires donor funding. So we need to, I guess, be better at articulating what it's going to take to get the data and the information that we need for these non-perfect baselines. And in order to create that information infrastructure, it does take money and resources, and we need to articulate that to the donors. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to group number 2. I'm sure also a smart group. Keep it short, because otherwise we're really going to be trapped by the protocol here. Yeah?
No. Thank you very much. I think the issues are more or less the same. It is only maybe we are putting them in different words, because for us we said a lot of work has been done, a lot of research work. So let's take stock of what is already there in terms of those ecological indicators and in terms of outcomes that are already there. Look at the analysis, and if there's need to do more analysis, let's do it. Then number 2, we are saying if we find that there are gaps, then more work can be done as part of knowledge management and evidence-based issues. Once that one has been done and we incorporate the various disciplines and analysis is properly done and those linkages can be established, then I think the biggest problem is dissemination, so that that information can come from the scientist, go to the second level, and also to the communities. And the third one will be then that information is used, because a lot of research is done, information is not shared, and then it's not applied. So that's all what we are saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Music to my ears, information and knowledge management, that's my field, so I think there's a future for this indeed. Third group is represented by Dr. Robinson.
I think, unless I didn't see anyone else in our group taking copious notes, so. It was pointed out that resilience, at least in the system resilience perspective, social ecological resilience, is an emergent property of complex systems. And so you bring that to development resilience, you may realize that even an upward trajectory of human development and well-being over a long enough term, if it's the wrong particular trajectory, may itself be undesirable, may be a trajectory that's involving undermining resilience in the long term. A normative approach to resilience, on the other hand, involves the fundamental challenge of identifying what we choose as a starting point or a reference point. And that raises the question of, well, who's defining what that reference point is? If it's, as I suggested on my last slide, something like a human development index, is that something that's being defined from externally? Coming back to system resilience, in fact, the social ecological resilience and systems thinking may have some conceptual tools to help us think through that question a bit too.
Thank you very much. What I do notice is that we don't have many Twitter users here, or you have a different way to tweet. But thank you very much for sharing your final thoughts on this. Of course, plant these ideas back in the different sessions tomorrow, tonight actually even, and discussing with one another. I would like to hand over, not? We gotta go. Okay, so thank you all very much. Thank you for the presenters. Thank you, Dr. Eriksson. And enjoy. The conference starts in an hour.